The biggest seas we saw off Cape Horn were about 60 feet from the trough to the top. And those big seas are serious. No seaman can really be confident that he could handle Cape Horn until he goes there and does it. That's a scary place. There were something like 50 gales in the 20 days we were down there. Cape Horn is the most rigorous test that a seaman can do. My father, he uses language in a very spare fashion, and I think very good. A man who loves the sea and ships can aspire to no more searching task than a Cape Horn passage. It is the last word in the lexicon of sailormen. There nature has arranged trials and tribulations so ingeniously that in the van of all synonyms for sea cruelty and hardship is the iron-bound name of Cape Horn. Winds blow elsewhere, brings tears to my eyes. Winds blow elsewhere at times as strongly as they do south of 50. There may be places equally remote and as bleakly lonely. Currents in other regions may be as adverse. These forces the sailorman may encounter separately in pairs here and there. I encounter in best, but always in his heart he will wonder if he could face all combined. I gotta wipe my eyes. This happens with some regularity. And I think I should see a psychiatrist to figure out what the mechanics are of the phenomenon, why it causes me to tear up. Wander Bird was an 85-foot German pilot schooner, which was purchased by Captain Tompkins at the age of 29 in Germany. This is Rufus caulking the decks. You drive in the oakum and then you pour hot pitch in. Preparing a schooner for an ocean passage is arduous work and it calls for a lot of detail. Wander Bird was carefully prepared. My father spent years getting himself and the schooner ready for this passage, and he modified her a good deal, changed her rig, and fixed her so she was much more suitable for this passage. And I faintly remember this. My father was working aloft, and he looked down, and he saw a stream of toys floating off astern. He recognized some of them. They were Commodore's toys. And, there's a teddy bear and, a cart and, things like that. And he, as he watched, he saw his young son, a little less than 4 years old, I guess, come on deck with another armload of stuff, and he dropped it over the side. And it turned out, when the dust had settled, and I was getting rid of stuff on the schooner because I had overheard a conversation that we needed all the space you could get to put things on the schooner for the long passage. And I was trying to help. The schooner was originally laid out to carry lots of pilots, but when we modified the schooner, we put a big galley in her. This is Harrison working at the stove, two-handed cook. And we carried coal under the galley floor to fire the stove. And shortly after the foremast, there was a great cabin where the pilots used to sleep and the crew presently slept. We carried water underneath the cabin sole and then the water tank on deck, extra water. These are two small boats, a spiral staircase leading to the deck house and the deck. My father did his navigation at a chart table just after the case, in the great cabin where the master's family lived. Really smelled good in that cabin because there was a bosun's locker immediately aft full of tar and hemp and sails and paint. My sister sometimes went aloft, and I frequently climbed in the rigging, and I'm shown here in the bowsprit. log, you say from Gloucester toward your destination, because in the sailing ship days, you're never sure that you're going to make it to your destination. So logs are properly entered in that fashion. We put out a taffrail log with a rotor spinner like that. It spins the cordage, and the cordage transmits the rotary motion to a device like this, which counts the miles. I think it was 10,000 miles that we sailed from Gloucester around to San Francisco. When you sail out of Gloucester southbound for the Horn, you sail east in the northeast trades in order to ultimately go south over the hump of South America. Sailboats have a lot of motion, particularly small sailboats. Wander Bird is such. And we make this kind of chafing gear. This is called baggy wrinkle. It's old rope yarns which are cut up and then hoisted aloft and deployed in the rigging to keep the canvas from chafing against the rig. Wander Bird had it all over the place because the cables and wires chafed the stitches out of the sails and chafed the fabric. Homeschooling was so much better than public schooling. It was Calvert's system we used on Wander Bird. And it was good, except it screwed up my writing because they wanted to do Spencerian penmanship. You're supposed to move your entire arm, as most people land their elbow and they write with their fingers. Well, you're supposed to use your entire arm. So they page after page of these exercises, and it was, I never really liked it much. But I admired my father's printing. And so I tried to duplicate my father's printing, and the result is my handwriting today is almost illegible. Sunlight travels around in the cabin. She had a wonderful motion, the schooner. Easy, heavy, long water line. She was 78 feet long on the water. My mother steering the schooner. The steering station in Wander Bird was extremely comfortable. The big box, and it was a worm gear. There was no great pressure on the helm. And the schooner was a wonderful place to play. Big, broad, open decks. Lots of places to go. You get to practice your skills and your hanging on and musculature stuff. We were pretty fearless as kids. And there are no harnesses, no life jackets, nothing of that sort. But we were careful. We are all primates after all, and we are evolved to hang on. And I'm everlastingly indebted to my father because he exhibited what I think was the finest bit of parenting I have ever heard about. My father was working aloft at the main truck, and I climbed up to join him, age 2. When I arrived at the cross trees, there's this little form, this little shape showing up there who could easily have turned into a grease spot. It's on the deck, 50-odd feet below. And his response was to say, "Oh, hello, son. I'm almost finished up here. Would you like to ride down on my shoulders?" Which he knew I loved. And he proceeded to fake finishing his job. And then he put me on his shoulders and carried me down the rig. And of all the responses he might have had, the response that he did do was the one most likely to allow me to proceed as a seaman, as a self-confident individual. It was a superb bit of work. As you get closer to the equator, it gets more and more pleasant, and you get following winds and you set running sails. Long watches at the wheel, steering gentle air. You cross the equator and Neptune comes aboard, usually portrayed by the master of the vessel. Northern European sailors, when they went into the Southern Hemisphere, they found all kinds of wildlife they'd never seen before. And so they had a ceremony to cross the equator, which was partially because it was light airs, and so they had this skylarking thing. We see John North here going through that ceremony. My sister and me playing on the deck was really very comfortable and very secure. We never had any concerns about safety of any sort. So that's seawater coming in through the scuppers we're playing in. Fresh water is a hard thing to come by. In those days, there were no water makers. We should plug the scuppers after the boat had been rinsed in the rain squall and collect the rain and pour it into this big deck tank. I'm working along with the rest of the crew, age 4, and now I'm shouting down the tank because there was a wonderful echo. I can remember that vividly. You know, we used to have 6 or 7 of these on the schooner. My mother was a smoker. I took one of these up to the rail on Wander Bird, and I was little. You know, it would have been less than 4. And I positioned it outside the rail. This is the rail with my left hand. I positioned it outside the rail and got it nice and square and let it go. And the damn thing sank. And the significance of this story is I sank about 6 of them, one after another. And that when I was involved in something like that, I was very inclined to think it was my fault, not anything else. It was my fault, whatever happened. In the case of the brass ashtrays, it wasn't my fault, but it wasn't very bright to drop 6 in a row. It's a long sail down the coast of South America to get to Cape Horn, and we were approaching Rio. It's our last stop before we ventured around the Horn. When you get south of 50, it's usually fairly light and variable east of the southern tip, and then you run into hard weather along the western shore and adverse currents, and the continental shelf is well offshore, and when the big swells and seas roll in from the west, they break on the continental shelf. It's very dangerous. We had light airs approaching Cape Horn, and having no engine, we had to wait and sail through it. There's all kinds of wildlife down off Cape Horn, and Cape pigeons, and the wandering albatross, which is a spectacular bird with a 12-foot wingspan. Sometimes the seabirds would bump into the unfamiliar boat, and this one fell onto our deck. It's a very young albatross, and we studied him and photographed him and put him back in his ocean. So it's pretty far south. It's close to Antarctica, 55 south, just about. We had seals, and we actually saw about an 18-foot shark. I think it's exquisitely beautiful. God, it's pretty. My father sold footage of this shark to the Hollywood movie industry, and it was portrayed. These pictures showed up in the movie Hurricane. My father tried to teach us not to be frightened of guns. This is the only gun we had on the boat, it's a pistol. And so he gave us an opportunity to practice with it. There were a lot of peculiar weather conditions off Cape Horn, and this is an example. Waterspouts. Waterspouts are a meteorological phenomenon, sometimes called tornadoes, and they have very high wind velocities at their core. They have a tendency to lift things off the water and strip the sails off of boats, causing lots of damage. And my father seems to have gotten fairly close or he wouldn't get these pictures. He certainly wasn't reducing sail at these points. This is Tierra del Fuego, and that's William and my sister and I eyeballing the scene. Cold and bleak, 55 south, tough stuff. Those things, you want to avoid them if you can. And if you do have to live through one of those things, you should be well enough prepared intellectually, experientially, and materially so that it isn't a life-threatening experience. The sky is riven by approaching wind. This is a big front coming in. That's Cape Horn in the distance, maybe 10 or 12 miles away. The wind is building, so this is the beginning of a big blow. We prepared a bunch of oil bags, and these are canvas bags which are roped along the edge for strength, and you put oakum inside and you stuff them with fish oil for deployment in hard weather. My father was 37, and it was a wonderful exhibit of seamanship. It was wonderful. It's a very fond memory of mine. Blowing harder every minute here, the big gale coming. Aside from determining which sails to carry, you had to determine the course and how far south to go. We ran the schooner off in order to furl the headsails. Sometimes the bowsprit would plunge into the heavy sea and he would wash the sails away from their lashing. We were relashing the headsails. There are two jibs there down in the bowsprit. Big seas, and all the dangers and the crests. And the biggest seas we saw off Cape Horn were about 60 feet from the trough to the top, which mercifully is a little bit less than the overall length of the schooner, so she had sort of inherent safety in that sea condition. So the schooner is going to be hove to here. Sailormen heave to in those conditions where they can't progress where they want to go. Conditions are severe and they can't make progress, or it's too uncomfortable, or they want to rest. So they rig the boat in such a way that she will jog along. And this sequence shows how the oil is deployed. There's the oil bag, and that's oil stored in old wine bottles. And the danger is in these breaking crests. And when you put the oil over the side, by its nature, it spreads across the surface of the sea, and it's a very thin film, thousandths or millionths of an inch thick, and it deprives the wind of friction on the surface of the water. And it's very effective, and as far as I know, these are the only motion pictures which ever show the difference between the near and the far sea as a result of oil. And it's never the wind that's blowing that causes the problem, it's always the breaking sea. So it's entirely possible that a breaking sea could land on the deck of a small boat, and the sudden arrival of 10 or 15 tons of water would break the superstructure and cause the boat to flood and sink. When you look at this picture, you look in the distance and you see white breaking water. And you look in the foreground and you'll see black water, no breaking. And that's because of the oil. And my sister and I are playing. It's worthy of note that those wicker chairs were on deck for the entire passage around Cape Horn. So the old man had a hard time trying to decide how far south to go, because when you're trying to take a small sailing boat to windward, you tack at about 100 degrees, and you can see some of that on this track. So you work to windward against the current and the adverse winds, and ultimately, in this particular case, we found ourselves close to the shore, and we ran off for sea room, which is what the seaman always wants. And we lost a couple of days' hard work. Safety at sea is something you generate yourself. You don't get it from somebody else. My sister and I didn't seem to ever get enough motion. And the wheel, as you see, is lashed, and the schooner is hove to. The seas are really big. This is kind of in color, in my memory. So I was 4, that was 79 years ago, and I can remember looking up from the trough at the sea, and you look up like that at the crest, and down at the trough when you're at the top. I remember that very vividly. Must have been hard on the sail, but we were light, I suppose. Canvas was tough. Dying seas, dying gale. As soon as you get a fair wind, you crack on sail and drive. Start making time for north. Wander Bird had a wonderfully fine entry as part of her racing pedigree. She was a good sailboat. My father photographed from all parts of the schooner, and in this particular picture, he's on the end of the main boom, which is mildly hazardous because he's close to the water, and if the boat rolled just right, he'd go in the water, camera and all. I loved doing this. I wanted to feel the pressure of the water. The water came shooting off the bow, and I always wanted to touch it. In due course, as you sail north, you get in favorable winds again, and you set the running gear. This is a photograph of me aloft with a friend, setting a topsail. My sister handling the sheet on the topsail, and me coming down the rigging. I always loved to try and hit somebody on deck. I always thought it'd be great fun to hit somebody on deck, but they always seemed to know when I was coming. I never got anybody. My sister and I are filmed as if we were hoisting this sail, but in fact we're not. It was fake. It's always bothered me. It bothered me at the time I was doing it. But my old man asked me to, so we did. This is the Rafael breaking out, and it's a wonderful running sail. It was one of our lightest, most powerful sails. William, happy, he was a great seaman. Nicer weather. When it got calm in these conditions, we used to swim off the schooner, and it was great. Deep water, no sand on deck. And I used to make models. This particular model came from the Canaries. Representation of our passage around Cape Horn. And we stopped actually in Rio. We stopped once in Talcahuano, but it's not shown. Average time for square riggers and sailing vessels was 120 days, and Wander Bird made it a few days quicker than that. Here we are entering. That's Harrison the cook, my father out on the whisker shrouds. And there's a wonderful photograph of the family. One of the reasons it's such a good photograph is that the body language of the participants is the way it is. My father is just completely relaxed and comfortable sitting on the rail. I am at the end of the bowsprit. I'm a 4-year-old kid and I'm having a ball. I'm just doing what I do. And my sister is hanging on for grim death, and my mother is looking anxious. And so it's, it speaks volumes to the whole experience. My sister and me aloft, worried about the rig hitting the bridge. I can remember that vividly. The Golden Gate had only just been opened, like a year before, or a few months before. I believe we were the first sailing yacht to come through the Golden Gate.